Hello there, let's tonight dive into the epic story of Cyrus the Great, the Persian king who conquered empires, freed nations, and became a timeless symbol of wisdom, justice, and power. Long before the name Persia became known across the ancient world, there was a land of mountains, deserts, and scattered tribes. This land was not as rich or as famous as Egypt or Mesopotamia. But it was important, like a bridge between East and West. Today, we call this place Iran. In ancient times, it was the home of many different peoples. Among them were the Medes and the Persians. The Medes and Persians spoke similar languages. Both were part of the Indo-Iranian group, meaning their ancestors came from the steppes, maybe from areas near Central Asia or the Caucasus Mountains. Over time, they settled on the Iranian plateau, a dry and rocky land, but with many valleys and highlands that could support life. While the Mesopotamians had large cities and wrote on clay tablets, the early Iranians lived in tribes. They raised animals, grew small farms, and followed strong chiefs. There were no great palaces, no mighty temples, and no pyramids. But they were proud, tough, and full of energy. Life on the Iranian plateau made people resilient. The Medes were the first among these groups to grow strong. By the 7th century BCE, they had built a kingdom in the northwest of Iran. They fought with the mighty Assyrians, and after years of struggle, they finally helped destroy the Assyrian Empire around 612 BCE. After that, the Medes became a major power. They ruled over other tribes, including the Persians. The Persians, at that time, were just a small tribe. They lived further to the south, in a land called Parsa, the source of the name Persia. Their land was not rich, but it was hard to attack. The people were known for their horse-riding skills, their discipline, and their loyalty to family and tribe. They worshipped ancient gods, followed the old ways, and had their own local kings, or chieftains. Among these chieftains was a man named Cambyses. He ruled a small group of Persians under the overlordship of the Median king, Astyages. Cambyses had a son, born around 600 BCE, whom he named Cyrus. Cyrus was not born into power. He was just a tribal prince, not even free to rule without the permission of the Medes. But something about him was different. He was brave, clever, and respected by his people. Even in his youth, stories grew around him. Greek historians, especially Herodotus, later told a legendary tale about how Cyrus' grandfather, Astyages, had a dream that the baby would overthrow him. To stop this, Astyages ordered the baby killed. But a kind herdsman saved the child and raised him in secret. When Cyrus grew older, his noble birth was discovered, and he was brought back to the court. Soon after, he would rise against his own grandfather. Whether this tale is true or not, one thing is certain: Cyrus eventually led a rebellion against the Medes. Around 550 BCE, he gathered his forces and marched against Astyages. His army was made of loyal tribesmen, fed up with Median rule. In a surprise to many, some of Astyages' own men turned against him. They helped Cyrus win. The defeat of Astyages was a turning point. Cyrus did not destroy the Medes. Instead, he merged their kingdom with his own. He treated the Medes with respect and used their officials in his new administration. This was the start of something new, the Achaemenid Empire, the first Persian empire. Cyrus named his dynasty after his ancestor, Achaemenes. He began to build a state that was different from others of the time. Instead of ruling with terror, like the Assyrians, Cyrus used tolerance. Instead of burning cities, he offered peace. He allowed different peoples to keep their religions and customs, as long as they were loyal. The Persian Empire began in a spirit of cooperation. Cyrus believed that an empire could only be strong if its people were respected. This made him unique among ancient kings. It also made him successful. But Cyrus' journey was just beginning. After uniting the Medes and Persians, he turned his eyes west, toward the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, the powerful city-states of Mesopotamia, and eventually, the captive Jews in Babylon. His early life, shaped by harsh land and tribal struggles, had prepared him for a much greater task, to build the largest empire the world had ever seen. After his victory over the Medes, Cyrus stood at the head of a new power. But it was still a fragile one. He needed to win the loyalty of different tribes and peoples. The way he handled this challenge became a model for future kings. Cyrus began organizing his government. He didn't destroy the Median system. Instead, he adopted many of its strengths. Median nobles were given important jobs. The capital city of Ecbatana, the former Median center, remained a royal city. By combining Persian courage with Median experience, Cyrus created a stronger, more balanced kingdom. Soon, his ambitions grew. He looked toward Lydia, a rich kingdom in Asia Minor, modern Turkey. Lydia was ruled by King Croesus, a man famous for his wealth. According to Herodotus, Croesus consulted the oracle of Delphi before going to war. The oracle told him that if he attacked Cyrus, he would destroy a great empire. Croesus thought this meant victory, but the empire he destroyed was his own. In 547 BCE, Cyrus invaded Lydia. His army moved fast. Though Croesus tried to gather allies, Cyrus was too quick. After a few months, the Persian army captured the Lydian capital, Sardis. Croesus was taken prisoner, but Cyrus spared his life, another example of his unusual mercy. Lydia was rich in gold and silver, and its capture made Persia far more powerful. But Cyrus wasn't done. He next turned eastward, to secure his empire's borders. He led campaigns in Central Asia, where fierce tribes like the Bactrians and Saka lived. These people were skilled horsemen and fighters. But Cyrus, with his leadership and strategy, defeated them. By the time he returned, the eastern frontiers of his empire stretched far beyond the old Persian homeland. Everywhere he went, Cyrus built respect. His style of rule was fair, not cruel. He didn't demand his subjects abandon their religions or cultures. Instead, he often let local rulers stay in place, as long as they pledged loyalty and paid tribute. This policy of tolerance helped reduce rebellion and made people more willing to accept Persian rule. Cyrus also began a tradition that would become a trademark of the Persian Empire: building infrastructure. Roads were improved, trade routes protected, and new cities established. A system of messengers allowed the king's orders to travel quickly across the empire. This would later be perfected by his successors, but it started with Cyrus. His greatest moment, however, was yet to come, a moment that would make him not only a famous conqueror, but a beloved figure in world history. That moment happened when he turned his attention to Babylon, the heart of Mesopotamia, the city of ancient kings and mighty walls. What he did there would change the lives of thousands and be remembered in the Bible. But before that, he had already achieved something remarkable. In less than 2 decades, a young prince from a small tribe in southern Iran had united the Medes and Persians, defeated the powerful Lydians, pushed back the tribes of the east, and created the foundations of an empire. And he had done so not with fear and cruelty, but with justice and respect. Cyrus the Great had risen. And the world would never be the same. Cyrus the Great was one of the most remarkable leaders in ancient history. After building a strong base in Persia and defeating the Medes, he set his eyes on new lands. One of the most famous stories about him involves his conquest of Lydia, a rich kingdom in the west, ruled by King Croesus. Croesus was known across the ancient world for his wealth. His riches were so great that people often said he was the richest man alive. Croesus ruled Lydia, a land that had long enjoyed peace and prosperity. However, the rise of Cyrus's power was a threat that Croesus could not ignore. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Croesus sought advice from the oracle of Delphi before going to war with Cyrus. The oracle gave a prophecy: if Croesus attacked, He would destroy a great empire. Croesus believed this meant he would win, but the oracle's words were more mysterious than they seemed. In 547 BCE, Croesus gathered his armies and marched against Cyrus. However, Cyrus was prepared and clever. The Persian forces defeated the Lydian army in a decisive battle. The city of Sardis, the Lydian capital, soon fell to Cyrus. Croesus was captured, but instead of punishing him harshly, Cyrus showed mercy. This act of kindness was unusual for a conqueror and helped Cyrus build a reputation as a just and wise ruler. The conquest of Lydia was a turning point for the Persian Empire. Lydia was a wealthy land, rich in gold and silver, which greatly increased the resources available to Cyrus. Moreover, Lydia's strategic location gave the Persian Empire greater access to Asia Minor and the Aegean Sea. But Cyrus's ambitions did not end with Lydia. He next turned his attention to Babylon, the greatest city of Mesopotamia and the ancient world. Babylon was known for its massive walls, impressive temples, and advanced culture. It was a city that many rulers before had tried and failed to conquer. In 539 BCE, Cyrus led his army to Babylon. The city was well defended, but the Persian army used clever tactics to enter. According to ancient sources, Cyrus's forces diverted the Euphrates River, which ran through Babylon, lowering its water level and allowing soldiers to enter through the riverbed. What followed was extraordinary. Unlike many conquerors who destroyed cities and oppressed peoples, Cyrus allowed Babylon to keep its culture and traditions. He was welcomed by many Babylonians as a liberator, not a conqueror. This peaceful transition was a rare event in the history of ancient warfare. One of the most famous documents from this time is the Cyrus cylinder. Discovered in the 19th century, the cylinder contains a declaration by Cyrus. It praises the gods of Babylon and announces his policies, including the freeing of captives and the restoration of temples. The Cyrus cylinder is often called the world's first human rights charter. While some scholars debate this, there is no doubt that Cyrus's policies were revolutionary for their time. He respected the religions and customs of the peoples he ruled, which helped maintain peace and loyalty in his vast empire. Cyrus's approach to governance was based on tolerance and respect. He allowed local leaders to keep their positions, as long as they paid tribute and obeyed the king. This created a system where many different peoples could live under Persian rule without feeling oppressed. His empire was vast and diverse, including Persians, Medes, Babylonians, Jews, Lydians, and many others. Managing such a multicultural empire was a challenge, but Cyrus's policies made it possible. By promoting religious freedom and cultural respect, Cyrus laid the foundation for a sustainable empire. His model was followed by his successors and influenced rulers for centuries. This blend of military skill and wise governance made Cyrus the Great a legendary figure. His empire stretched from the Indus Valley in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west, covering a vast part of the ancient world. Cyrus's legacy is not just in the land he conquered, but in the way he ruled. His respect for diversity and justice is remembered as one of the earliest examples of enlightened leadership. After the peaceful conquest of Babylon, Cyrus the Great continued to strengthen his empire by focusing on building a system that allowed different peoples and cultures to coexist. Unlike many rulers of his time, who used fear and force to keep control, Cyrus believed in respect and cooperation. This was one of the main reasons why the Persian Empire remained strong and united for so many years. One of the key elements of Cyrus's governance was his respect for religion. He understood that religion was a central part of life for many people, so he allowed them to worship their gods freely. For example, after conquering Babylon, Cyrus allowed the Jewish people, who had been held captive there for decades, to return to their homeland. He even helped them rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This act earned him great respect not only from the Jews but also from other peoples who saw Cyrus as a fair and kind leader. Cyrus also created a government system that used local leaders to help manage different parts of the empire. Instead of placing Persian officials everywhere, he allowed local rulers to keep their positions, as long as they remained loyal and paid taxes. This system helped reduce rebellions because people felt more connected to their own leaders. It also made governing a vast empire easier and more efficient. To communicate and manage such a large empire, Cyrus built a network of roads and a postal system. This allowed messages to travel quickly between different parts of the empire, helping the king stay informed and maintain control. The most famous road was the Royal Road, which stretched from Susa in Persia to Sardis in Lydia. This road not only helped with government communication but also encouraged trade and cultural exchange across the empire. Cyrus's policies showed an early understanding of what it meant to govern a diverse population. His empire included many different languages, customs, and traditions. By respecting these differences and allowing local autonomy, he created a model for multicultural governance that was rare in the ancient world. Moreover, Cyrus encouraged the mixing of cultures through trade and diplomacy. Cities like Babylon became centers where ideas, goods, and people from different parts of the empire could meet. This cultural exchange helped make the Persian Empire a place of innovation and learning. The story of Croesus, the wealthy Lydian king, is also important in understanding Cyrus's rise. Croesus had underestimated Cyrus and the strength of the Persian forces. His defeat and capture symbolized the shift in power from older kingdoms to the new Persian Empire. Despite his wealth, Croesus could not stand against Cyrus's military skill and political wisdom. Cyrus's ability to balance conquest with tolerance was key to his success. He knew that force alone could not hold such a large empire together. Instead, he built trust and loyalty through respect and fairness. This approach was reflected in the famous Cyrus Cylinder, which many historians consider the first declaration of human rights. The cylinder declares that Cyrus freed slaves, returned lands to their original owners, and restored temples to their gods. While it is a royal propaganda piece, it shows how Cyrus wanted to present himself as a just ruler who cared for his people. The legacy of Cyrus's governance influenced many later empires. His respect for human rights and local traditions was unusual for the time, and it helped set the Persian Empire apart from others. His model was studied and admired by rulers for centuries, including the leaders of the Roman and Byzantine empires. In summary, Cyrus the Great was not only a brilliant military leader but also a wise and compassionate ruler. His conquests expanded the Persian Empire to new heights, but it was his innovative governance that made the empire last. By respecting the diversity of his subjects and promoting peace and cooperation, Cyrus created one of the greatest empires in history. Beyond his military victories and policies of tolerance, Cyrus the Great worked hard to establish an efficient administrative system that could support his vast empire. The Persian Empire was the largest the world had seen at that time, stretching from the Indus Valley in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west. Managing such a large and diverse territory required strong organization and practical solutions. Cyrus divided his empire into regions called satrapies. Each satrapy was governed by a satrap, a local governor who acted as the king's representative. The satraps were responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining security, and overseeing local laws. However, to prevent any satrap from becoming too powerful or rebellious, Cyrus also appointed royal inspectors. These inspectors traveled secretly throughout the empire to monitor the satraps and report back to the king. This system helped maintain balance and order within the empire. Another important aspect of Cyrus's governance was his respect for local customs and laws. While he was the supreme ruler, he did not force Persian laws on conquered peoples. Instead, he allowed them to keep their own legal systems and traditions, as long as they pledged loyalty to the empire. This respect helped reduce conflicts and rebellions, as people did not feel their identities were being erased. Cyrus also supported infrastructure projects that benefited the whole empire. Building roads, canals, and cities not only helped trade and communication but also created jobs and stimulated local economies. The Royal Road, for example, was about 1,700 miles long and had rest stations along the way where travelers and messengers could rest and change horses. This road greatly improved the speed of communication and helped unify the empire. In addition to roads, Cyrus encouraged the use of a common currency. Before his empire, many regions used their own coins or bartered goods. Cyrus introduced standardized coins made of silver, called darics, which made trade easier and more reliable. This helped economic growth and connected distant parts of the empire. Cyrus's approach to governance was unique because it combined military strength with respect for diversity and good administration. Many empires before him had used fear and oppression to control conquered peoples, but these methods often led to unrest and rebellion. Cyrus showed that an empire could be strong if its people felt respected and fairly treated. The legacy of Cyrus's empire is visible even today. His policies of tolerance and governance influenced later rulers, including the Achaemenid kings who followed him, such as Darius the Great and Xerxes. They continued to develop the empire using many of Cyrus's ideas. Cyrus's respect for human rights, religious freedom, and cultural diversity is often praised by historians. His empire was not just about conquering lands but about creating a community where different peoples could live and work together. The story of Cyrus the Great teaches us that leadership is not only about winning battles but also about understanding people and governing wisely. His combination of military skill, diplomacy, and enlightened policies helped build one of the most successful empires in history. The history of the Jewish people during the Babylonian exile is one of the most important and moving stories from ancient times. Around 586 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II invaded the kingdom of Judah. He destroyed Jerusalem, including its famous First Temple, which was the center of Jewish worship. Many Jewish leaders, craftsmen, and ordinary people were captured and taken away to Babylon, a city far from their homeland. This event is known as the Babylonian captivity or the exile. The exile was a difficult time for the Jewish people. They were forced to live in a strange land, under the rule of a foreign king, away from their homes, their temple, and their traditions. However, they did not lose their faith. In Babylon, they gathered in communities and continued to practice their religion secretly. They prayed for the day when they could return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Nebuchadnezzar's goal was to control and weaken the kingdom of Judah by removing its people and leaders. This strategy was common among ancient empires to prevent rebellion. But the Jewish people's hope for freedom did not fade. After several decades, a new king rose to power in Persia. His name was Cyrus the Great. Unlike many conquerors before him, Cyrus had a unique approach to ruling. In 539 BCE, he defeated Babylon and took control of its vast empire, but instead of destroying the city or punishing its people, he allowed them to live peacefully and continue their customs. Cyrus is remembered in the Bible as a great liberator. The books of Ezra and Isaiah in the Old Testament speak of him with respect and even call him the Lord's anointed, meaning chosen by God to free the Jewish people. Isaiah 45:1 says, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him and to loose the belts of kings." Cyrus issued a decree that allowed the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem. This decree is known as the Edict of Cyrus. It stated that the Jews could rebuild the temple and restore their worship. This was a moment of hope and joy for the Jewish people after years of exile and suffering. Many historians and scholars believe that Cyrus's decision to free the Jews was both a political and a religious act. Politically, it helped him gain the loyalty of many different groups in his empire, including the Jews. Religiously, It showed his respect for the gods and traditions of the peoples he ruled. This policy of tolerance was one of the reasons the Persian Empire lasted for so long. The return to Jerusalem was a major event in Jewish history. Under Persian protection, the Jews were able to rebuild their temple, called the Second Temple. This rebuilding symbolized the revival of their faith and culture. The relationship between the Persian Empire and the Jewish people was unique. The Jews remembered Cyrus as a kind and just ruler who helped restore their nation. This bond lasted for many years and is still remembered today. When Cyrus entered Babylon in 539 BCE, he did not destroy the city. Instead, he walked in peacefully, welcomed by many of its citizens. This peaceful takeover surprised the world. Babylon had been a powerful and proud empire. Now it fell, not by fire and blood, but by wisdom and strategy. The Persian army entered without major conflict. The priests and nobles of Babylon accepted Cyrus, and temples remained untouched. To the people, this foreign king seemed like a friend, not a conqueror. But for the Jewish exiles, something even more remarkable happened. Only a short time after taking Babylon, Cyrus made a public declaration. He said the God of heaven had told him to let the Jews return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This moment is recorded in the book of Ezra, chapter 1. It says, "Thus says Cyrus king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah." For the Jewish people, this was a miracle. They had waited 70 years, crying by the rivers of Babylon, dreaming of home. Now, a king who did not worship their God was acting like a prophet. He was not only giving them freedom, he was giving them purpose, to rebuild the holy place where their faith began. Why did Cyrus do this? Some believe he was deeply inspired by religion. Others think he was politically wise. Most likely, it was both. Cyrus had learned that to rule an empire of many nations and beliefs, tolerance worked better than fear. By respecting each nation's gods, temples, and customs, he could win hearts as well as lands. There is another piece of evidence, the Cyrus cylinder. This clay artifact, found in Babylon in 1879, tells us how Cyrus let many captive peoples return to their homes. It also says he restored temples to their gods. Though it does not name the Jews directly, the policy matches perfectly. Cyrus allowed the Jews to leave Babylon freely. He encouraged donations of gold, silver, and goods for rebuilding the temple. He also returned the sacred objects that had been stolen from the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar, over 5,400 items, according to Ezra. Not all Jews returned home immediately. Life in Babylon had become familiar, even stable for some. But about 50,000 made the long journey back, led by a man named Zerubbabel, a descendant of King David. They carried with them their faith, their stories, and the blessing of a foreign emperor who believed in peace. The journey back was hard. Jerusalem was in ruins. The Temple Mount was just rubble and weeds. The people were poor and tired. But with courage and help from Persia, they began again. The temple was not rebuilt overnight. It took years. There was resistance from local groups. There was fear and doubt. But the Persian kings, starting with Cyrus and continuing with Darius I, supported the project. In time, stone by stone, the Second Temple rose from the dust. This new temple was smaller than Solomon's, but it was full of meaning. It became the heart of Jewish worship. It was the place where the Torah was read, the festivals were kept, and sacrifices were made. It was a symbol that God had not forgotten his people. To the Jews, Cyrus was not just a political leader. He was chosen by God, even if he didn't fully understand it himself. In Isaiah 45, he is even called his anointed, the Hebrew word Mashiach, or Messiah. Imagine that, a non-Jewish king being called God's anointed one. No other Gentile has ever received that title in Jewish scripture. This moment in history created something rare, a deep respect between Jews and Persians. Later Persian kings, like Darius and Artaxerxes, continued this friendship. When the Greeks and Romans ruled, many Jews looked back to the days of Cyrus as a golden time. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century CE, also praised Cyrus and quoted his decree. Even today, Jews remember Cyrus with honor. In synagogues, his name is read during the Sabbath reading of Isaiah. In modern times, Israel's leaders have thanked Persia, Iran's ancient name, for this history. In 1971, during a celebration in Iran for 2,500 years of monarchy, Jewish leaders around the world sent messages of respect for Cyrus the Great. This story, of exile, hope, and return, has shaped the Jewish spirit for generations. And it all began with one king, who ruled with tolerance instead of terror. The rebuilding of the Second Temple in Jerusalem was not only a spiritual revival, it was also a political and logistical challenge. Imagine returning to a destroyed homeland after 70 years. Houses were gone, fields were overgrown, and the city was full of ruins. The Jewish returnees had to start from nothing. But their determination was strong, and the memory of Cyrus's words gave them hope. Zerubbabel, the leader of the first return, began organizing the rebuilding process. The first task was to rebuild the altar, so that sacrifices could resume. Then came the foundation of the temple. The book of Ezra describes a beautiful moment. When the foundation was laid, the people wept and shouted for joy. Some older people remembered the glory of Solomon's temple, and their tears mixed with the cries of hope from the younger generation. However, the work did not continue smoothly. Local people who had lived in the land during the exile offered to help, but the returnees refused, saying this was a special mission for those loyal to the God of Israel. Tensions grew. Some local groups began spreading rumors and sending letters to Persian officials, saying the Jews were planning to rebel. The construction was delayed for years. It wasn't until the reign of Darius I, years after Cyrus, that the building resumed. Darius found the original decree of Cyrus in the Persian archives and reaffirmed it. He ordered the enemies of the Jews to stop interfering and even gave new funds from the Persian treasury to support the temple's completion. By 515 BCE, 20 years after the return, the Second Temple was finally finished. Though it lacked the grandeur of Solomon's original, it became the heart of Jewish life. For hundreds of years, until it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, this temple stood as the center of Jewish worship and national identity. Persian support was key to this success. Not only did they allow the Jews to return, but they also gave official permission and resources. This was almost unheard of in ancient times, an empire helping a subject people to revive their religion and rebuild a holy place. Why did Persia do this? Cyrus and his successors understood that an empire based on respect was stronger than one based only on fear. By allowing people to worship their own gods, live by their own customs, and even rebuild their temples, the Persians gained loyal subjects. For the Jewish people, this was more than good politics. It felt like divine mercy. Over the centuries, Jewish memory of Cyrus remained strong. His name appears not just in the Bible but also in historical writings and prayers. The ancient Jewish historian Josephus, writing during Roman times, said that Cyrus read the Jewish scriptures and was inspired to fulfill God's prophecy. While we cannot be sure this is fact, it shows how deeply Jewish people respected him. Even today, Cyrus is remembered with gratitude. In modern Israel, leaders have praised his example. In 2015, Prime Minister Netanyahu compared the U.S. to ancient Persia, saying that Cyrus had set a model for religious freedom. In museums and books, the Cyrus Cylinder is often called the world's first human rights charter, even though some scholars debate that term. The cylinder itself, now kept in the British Museum, includes a passage where Cyrus says he gathered exiles and sent them back to their homes. Though it does not mention Jews by name, it fits the policy described in the Bible. This small clay object has become a powerful symbol, not just of Cyrus, but of an ideal, a ruler who wins through respect. In ancient Israel, Cyrus's kindness had a lasting effect. The Jewish people never forgot that the most important return in their history, the return from exile, was made possible not by one of their own kings, but by a foreign ruler with a wise and generous heart. This helped shape the Jewish understanding of history. They saw that God could use anyone, even a Gentile emperor, as a tool for justice and mercy. It also planted the seed of a hope that one day, the world would be ruled not by cruelty, but by justice and compassion. Cyrus became part of a larger story, the story of survival, return, and faith. His name, though Persian, was written in Hebrew scrolls, remembered in prayers, and honored in hearts. Even today, thousands of years later, the connection between Jews and Persians from this ancient time continues to be remembered as a rare moment of mutual respect. In a world often divided by power and pride, this story stands as a reminder. Sometimes, the greatest leaders are not those who conquer by force, but those who lead with vision and kindness. Cyrus the Great died around 530 BCE during a campaign in Central Asia. The exact circumstances of his death are still debated by historians. Some say he fell in battle against a nomadic tribe called the Masajdi, led by a fierce warrior queen named Tomarus. Others believe he died peacefully in the region after a long life of military campaigns. Whatever the truth, his death marked the end of one of the most remarkable lives in ancient history. Cyrus was buried in Pasargadae, the first capital of the Achaemenid Empire, located in what is now southern Iran. His tomb is simple but majestic. It consists of a rectangular stone chamber set atop 6 broad steps. The design is humble compared to the towering monuments of Egypt or Mesopotamia, but it speaks of strength, dignity, and peace. Greek historian Aristobulus, who visited the tomb long after Cyrus's death, wrote that it had a golden coffin, a bed with fine linen, and some clothing, weapons, and jewelry inside. On the outside was a short inscription in 3 languages. Though the exact words are debated, many believe it said something like, "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire. Do not begrudge me this bit of earth that covers my body." This inscription shows Cyrus's humility even in death. It also reflects how he wanted to be remembered, not just as a conqueror, but as a just ruler. Centuries later, Alexander the Great arrived in Persia and made a special journey to visit Cyrus's tomb. He had conquered the Persian Empire, yet he deeply respected Cyrus. When he found the tomb damaged and looted, Alexander ordered it to be repaired and even assigned guards to protect it. This act was not just political, it showed admiration. Alexander saw himself as a world unifier, much like Cyrus. He believed in blending cultures, respecting local traditions, and building an empire that went beyond borders. In Cyrus, he found a role model. Though they came from very different cultures, Greek and Persian, they shared a dream of universal rule based on respect and inclusion. For centuries after Cyrus's death, his memory continued to live on. In Zoroastrian traditions, he was seen as a king who brought justice. In Jewish texts, he was remembered as a liberator. Even among the Greeks, his story was retold with admiration. Xenophon, a student of Socrates, wrote a book called Cyropaedia, or The Education of Cyrus, which presented him as the perfect ruler, wise, brave, and ethical. Then, after many centuries of silence, Cyrus's name returned to the center of attention in the 20th century. In the early 1900s, Iran was struggling to redefine its identity. After centuries of foreign rule and influence, many Iranians wanted to remember their roots. They looked back to the great kings of ancient Persia, especially Cyrus. In this period, a group of thinkers and nationalists began calling Cyrus the father of the nation. He became a symbol of unity, pride, and resistance. His image was printed on stamps. His story was taught in schools. Politicians and poets praised him as the founder of Iranian civilization. In 1971, to mark 2,500 years of the Persian monarchy, the Shah of Iran held a grand celebration at Pasargadae. World leaders were invited. Tents were built near Cyrus's tomb. The Shah stood before the ancient stone structure and declared, "Cyrus, sleep in peace. We are awake and will always remain awake." This moment was meant to connect modern Iran with its ancient glory. Not everyone agreed with this view. Some critics said the celebration was too expensive or out of touch with the people's needs. But the message was clear: Cyrus was not just a figure from the past. He was a living part of Iranian identity. Of course, some scholars argue that the cylinder was more of a royal propaganda tool than a human rights charter. Ancient kings often wanted to show themselves as kind and just, even if their actions were also political. But even so, Cyrus's policies were unusual for the time. He did not force religion on his subjects. He allowed diversity. He encouraged rebuilding. These values still matter today. In a world struggling with intolerance and division, the idea of a ruler who respected all peoples and faiths is powerful. That's why Cyrus is admired by so many different groups. Jews remember him as the king who ended their exile. Their holy books call him the Lord's anointed. They saw in him a foreign king who served the purposes of their God. Iranians see him as the founder of their empire and identity. To them, he is a symbol of justice and unity. Kurds also respect Cyrus. Some believe their ancestors were part of the Medes, the people who helped Cyrus rise to power. In his story, they find strength and pride. Even in the West, Cyrus is often mentioned in discussions of leadership and ethics. Writers and thinkers have used him as an example of good rule for centuries. From the Greeks to modern human rights activists, his legacy continues. But what does this all mean? It means that Cyrus the Great was more than a conqueror. He was a visionary. His empire did not just grow by war, it grew by respect. He saw value in diversity, and he understood that real strength comes from trust. His tomb still stands in the desert. It has no gold, no grand carvings, no statues of gods. Just stone and silence. But in that silence, his message speaks louder than ever. While Cyrus the Great died over 2,500 years ago, his legacy continues to shape identities, inspire values, and stir emotions across many cultures. This is rare in history. Most ancient rulers are remembered only in books or museums. But Cyrus still lives in political debates, national ceremonies, religious stories, and even modern protests. Let's explore how different people today remember and honor Cyrus, and why he still matters. In modern Iran, Cyrus has become more than just a historical figure. For many Iranians, he represents the values they long for: justice, tolerance, unity, and pride. These feelings have become even stronger in recent decades. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has been ruled by religious leaders. But many Iranians who want a more secular or democratic system look to Cyrus as a symbol of what Iran used to be, and what it could become again. On Cyrus the Great Day each year, thousands of people gather at his tomb in Pasargadae. They wave the pre-revolutionary flag. They sing songs about freedom. Some even shout political slogans. These gatherings are not just about the past. They are about the present. They show how people are using history to demand change. For these Iranians, Cyrus is not just a great king, he is a kind of silent leader who still watches over the country. This makes Cyrus's memory powerful, but also complicated. The current government is cautious about these gatherings. Sometimes they block the roads or arrest people. But the crowds keep coming. That shows how deeply the memory of Cyrus is rooted in the Iranian heart. Outside Iran, Cyrus also has strong admirers, especially in the Jewish world. As we saw earlier, the Bible speaks very highly of Cyrus. He is called God's shepherd and is anointed. This is extraordinary. No other non-Jewish figure in the Bible is given such praise. To the Jewish people, Cyrus was not just a good king, he was an instrument of divine will. For centuries, Jewish communities prayed for him. His name was included in religious texts and stories. In some medieval Jewish poetry, he was even compared to the Messiah. Why? Because he gave the Jewish people hope, dignity, and a second chance. In modern Israel, Cyrus is still respected. At the founding of the state in 1948, some leaders even compare the return of Jews to their land with the return from Babylon under Cyrus. Israeli politicians and rabbis have quoted him to support ideas of peace, rebuilding, and religious freedom. In fact, Cyrus's memory once helped build ties between Iran and Israel. Before 1979, the two countries had warm relations. Iranian Jews lived in peace, and both governments spoke proudly of Cyrus as a common historical link. Even today, when relations are tense, Jewish leaders still speak with respect about ancient Persia's greatest king. Among the Kurdish people, Cyrus is remembered in a different way. Some Kurds believe they are descended from the ancient Medes, who helped Cyrus overthrow the Babylonians. Kurdish culture celebrates independence, pride, and resistance, values that match Cyrus's story. For Kurdish historians and poets, Cyrus is a hero of unity. He brought together different tribes and built an empire based on cooperation. In some Kurdish regions, schools and streets are named after Cyrus. His legacy is used to inspire pride and identity. It also helps connect the Kurds to a larger Persian past, even though they often seek independence from modern Iran. In the Western world, Cyrus's memory entered through Greek writings and the Bible. Ancient writers like Herodotus and Xenophon made him famous. In the 18th century, European philosophers began to rediscover him. They admired his style of leadership. Thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu praised him. They saw Cyrus as a model ruler, wise, kind, and tolerant. In a time when kings ruled by force, Cyrus offered a different image. He respected religions, helped the poor, and kept peace in a vast empire. In the United States, some of the founding fathers knew about Cyrus. Thomas Jefferson owned a copy of Xenophon's Cyropaedia. He believed Cyrus's leadership showed how power could be used for good. Jefferson's idea of a republic based on justice and liberty may have been influenced, in part, by the stories of Cyrus. In more recent times, the Cyrus cylinder has played a key role in spreading his legacy. Since its discovery in Babylon in 1879, this small clay object has become a powerful symbol. When a copy was displayed at the United Nations in the 1970s, many called it the world's first human rights charter. The cylinder says that Cyrus returned idols to their temples, respected the customs of the people he conquered, and allowed deported peoples to return home. While this was written in the language of ancient royal propaganda, it was still very unusual for the time. Most kings destroyed temples. Cyrus rebuilt them. This has made the Cyrus cylinder a favorite topic for historians, politicians, and activists. In 2013, the British Museum lent it to Iran for a special exhibition. Over 1 million people came to see it. Some cried. Some prayed. Many said it made them feel proud to be Iranian. Even outside the Middle East, the cylinder has been seen in museums in London, New York, and Tokyo. It inspires people from all backgrounds. Why? Because it represents an idea that power can be used for good, and that even in ancient times, justice mattered. But Cyrus's legacy is not without debate. Some scholars argue that he was not so different from other ancient kings. They say he used kindness as a political tool. By treating conquered peoples well, he avoided rebellions. By allowing exiles to return home, he gained loyalty. By honoring local gods, he made himself acceptable to new subjects. In this view, Cyrus was smart, but not necessarily more moral than others. Others disagree. They say that even if Cyrus's policies helped him rule better, they were still rare and generous. Most kings didn't care about their subjects' beliefs. Cyrus did. That alone makes him special. In the end, maybe both views are true. Cyrus was wise enough to see that kindness could also be strength. He built loyalty not through fear, but through respect. That is why his memory lives on, in Iran, in Israel, among the Kurds, in Western books, and in the hearts of ordinary people. Across time and place, people have looked to Cyrus as a reminder that leadership does not have to be cruel to be powerful. When you stand before his tomb at Pasargadae, it feels quiet and peaceful. The wind moves through the dry hills. There is no grand statue, no golden crown. Just a simple stone box on a stepped platform. And yet, that quiet place holds the memory of a king who ruled not just with a sword, but with a heart. His empire is gone, but his message remains. More than 2,000 years after his death, Cyrus the Great remains one of the most fascinating figures in world history. His image lives in two very different mirrors, one held by the West, shaped by Greek writers like Herodotus, the other by the East, through the Bible and ancient Near Eastern traditions. Each version shows a different man, yet both agree on one thing: Cyrus was no ordinary king. In the Bible, Cyrus is chosen by God. This is not a small honor. He is the only non-Jewish figure who is called God's anointed in the Hebrew Scriptures. For the writers of the Bible, Cyrus was not just a good man. He was a tool of divine purpose. He freed the Jews from captivity in Babylon and allowed them to return home and rebuild their temple. He did not force them to change their religion. Instead, he supported it. This image made a deep impression. For many centuries, Jewish people saw Cyrus as a hero sent by heaven. In later times, Christian thinkers admired him too. They saw him as a symbol of justice, mercy, and divine order. Some even believed that his leadership was a model for Christian kings to follow. In contrast, the Greek historian Herodotus painted a different picture. His Cyrus was clever, brave, and a great conqueror, but he was still human. He made mistakes. He had flaws. He was not a holy figure, but a wise ruler who knew how to balance war and peace. Herodotus tells colorful stories about Cyrus's childhood, how he rose to power, and how he treated both friends and enemies. In one story, young Cyrus is raised by a herdsman because his grandfather feared a prophecy. In another, Cyrus defeats the mighty king Croesus not only through battle, but through kindness, sparing his life and making him an advisor. These tales show Cyrus as both strong and thoughtful. He is a builder of empires, not just through violence, but through diplomacy and respect. The Greek view of Cyrus influenced how later Western thinkers understood leadership. In the 18th century, when Europe was rethinking monarchy and freedom, writers looked back at Cyrus as a ruler who used his power wisely. His image in the West became more than historical, it became political. Leaders like Thomas Jefferson admired the stories of Cyrus as told by Xenophon, another Greek writer. His book, the Cyropaedia, showed Cyrus as the perfect king: fair, brave, moderate. It is amazing that one man could be remembered in such different ways, either as God's chosen shepherd or as the model philosopher king. Yet these two views have something in common. Both see Cyrus as a rare kind of leader, one who could win wars and still be kind, one who held great power and used it not just for glory, but for peace. To understand how unique Cyrus was, we can compare him to other famous men from his time. Around the same century, across the world, three other great figures lived: Pericles in Greece, Confucius in China, and the Buddha in India. Each of them shaped their own civilization in deep ways. But none of them ruled empires like Cyrus did. Pericles was a brilliant leader of Athens. He guided the city during its golden age. He supported art, philosophy, and democracy. But his world was limited. His ideas mostly helped free male citizens of one city. He led his people into a long war, the Peloponnesian War, that finally destroyed Athens' power. Pericles inspired minds, but not peace. Confucius never ruled a kingdom. He was a teacher, a philosopher, a dreamer of order and harmony. He taught rulers how to behave with virtue. But he lived during the Warring States period in China, when violence was everywhere. Most kings ignored him during his life. His teachings were for the future, not the present. The Buddha also lived during a time of change. He left his palace, gave up wealth, and searched for the truth. His teachings brought inner peace, not political power. He spoke of compassion and letting go of desire. He changed hearts, but he did not change borders. Cyrus was different. He built an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. He ruled over dozens of cultures, religions, and languages. Yet he tried to unite them not by force, but by fairness. He allowed each people to keep their customs. He respected their gods. His empire became a model of tolerance. This makes him unique. While others taught or governed in small spaces, Cyrus governed a world. He showed that power does not always need cruelty. His empire lasted long after his death because it was not built on fear alone. The spirit of Cyrus did not end with his death. In fact, his influence stretched far into history, so far that emperors centuries later tried to follow his example. Some rulers admired him so much that they copied his style, his laws, and even his attitude toward other cultures. Let's start with Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Augustus rose to power after a long period of civil war. Like Cyrus, he presented himself as a bringer of peace. He rebuilt temples, promoted traditional values, and allowed local cultures to continue under Roman control. His rule was called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Many scholars believe that Augustus, or at least the people who wrote about him, were influenced by the image of Cyrus as a wise ruler who brings harmony to a broken world. Then there was Napoleon Bonaparte. Though he lived more than 2,000 years after Cyrus, Napoleon also saw himself as a world builder. He admired leaders who changed history through action and vision. Napoleon read the works of Greek writers like Xenophon, who described Cyrus in glowing terms. He even carried a copy of the Cyropaedia with him on his campaigns. To Napoleon, Cyrus represented an ideal, a leader who could win battles, organize a vast empire, and still be admired by those he conquered. But admiration for Cyrus didn't come only from kings and generals. Philosophers and political thinkers also looked to his example. During the Enlightenment, when many European thinkers were writing about liberty and justice, they rediscovered Cyrus. They saw in him an ancient ruler who respected the rights of others, long before modern ideas of human rights were born. Voltaire and Montesquieu both wrote about Cyrus with praise. In fact, in the 20th century, some scholars began calling the famous Cyrus cylinder a clay artifact with inscriptions about Cyrus's rule, the first human rights declaration in history. Though this idea is debated, the cylinder's message is clear. Cyrus allowed conquered people to worship freely and return to their homelands. He didn't burn cities or erase cultures. He wanted loyalty, not fear. That message still matters today. In modern Iran, Cyrus is remembered not just as a historical king, but as a symbol of national pride. Even though Iran is now an Islamic republic, people across political and religious lines admire Cyrus. Some call him the father of the Iranian nation. His tomb at Pasargadae is visited by thousands every year. On Cyrus Day, which unofficially happens in October, people gather there to honor his legacy. Outside of Iran, the memory of Cyrus has different meanings. For the Jewish people, he remains a liberator. His name is written in the Bible, not as a villain or conqueror, but as a chosen figure who helped restore their faith. He made the return from Babylon possible and supported the rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple. This act gave him a place of deep respect in Jewish history, even though he was a foreigner. The Kurds, too, see Cyrus as part of their heritage. Some Kurdish legends link him to their own ancient stories of resistance and unity. Though the history is complex, many Kurds see him as a ruler who stood for freedom and cultural dignity. In the West, especially among historians and educators, Cyrus is often taught as an example of enlightened rule. While not perfect, he is one of the rare ancient kings who is remembered more for his mercy than his cruelty. His empire is often compared to later empires like Rome or Britain, but with a softer touch. His way of ruling, through tolerance and respect, is considered ahead of its time. Of course, not everyone agrees on what Cyrus truly was. Some historians say the kind image of Cyrus was a tool, used by later rulers to justify their own power. Others think the stories about his kindness were made greater with time. Maybe Cyrus was more like other kings, ambitious, strategic, and sometimes harsh. After all, he did conquer many lands, and war always brings pain. But even if the real Cyrus was more complex, the image of him has power. Myths shape how people think. The myth of Cyrus, as the wise, fair, and just king, has inspired not only rulers, but also ordinary people. It tells us that power does not always need to destroy. That strength can be used for peace. That a great leader can build, not just break. In a world still filled with conflict, the story of Cyrus offers a rare hope. Maybe that's why his name, more than 2,500 years later, still matters.